this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I am a digital marketer in life sciences. Before we hop into today's episode, I have just a quick message from our sponsor. This episode of Life Science Success is brought to you by D3 Digital Media Marketing. Dive into the digital world with confidence and creativity on your side. D3 Digital Media Marketing is your all-in-one solution for making a lasting impact online. From the vibrant, engaging world of social media marketing, podcasts, and webinars to the strategic depths of website development, SEO, and content marketing, we tailor our approach to fit your unique brand story. Let's elevate your presence and drive success together. Your digital journey starts here. Visit d3digitalmedia.com to learn more. In this episode of Life Science Success, my guest is Gayatri Raghupathy. She's a scientific strategist and AI innovator with a PhD in molecular biology. As the VP of Scientific and Business Strategy at Cognitic, Gayatri has been instrumental in developing AI-driven competitive intelligence platforms for oncology and immunology, working with major pharmaceutical companies to drive innovation in the drug development process. So with that, welcome, Gayatri.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. Would you mind just telling the listeners a little bit about yourself, but also what is it that led you to this sort of intersection of molecular biology and AI?
Sure, happy to. Thanks everyone for joining us today. So as a background, I now have to go back to my high school time to paint the story of how I came to this intersection of molecular biology and AI. So looking back, I think, I was fascinated. What fascinated me, I still remember this vividly, sitting in my high school classroom when I heard for the first time about something called as molecular scissors and how, Dolly the sheep was cloned. And I was like, wait, that's amazing. And as a kid, I always was cutting something with scissors, and I would always make a mess and get in trouble for that. So when I heard the word molecular scissors, it's just that concept that fascinated me, right? Where these are recombinant enzymes that go in and cut up a DNA, and then you can paste them together. So the whole cut and copy gluing concept was intriguing to me, and the fact that you could work with something that you actually cannot see, right? So you're not able to see what's going on, but you're making a lot of interpretation, working in the blind, in with invisible things that, right? Literally a tube that looks like a 1 ml water, right? And then you're doing a lot of experiments that have groundbreaking results from it. So that concept fascinated me to get into the track of biotechnology. And I did my schooling in India and undergrad in India. And then I came here to the United States, where at that time, there was a lot going on with biotechnology here. So I really wanted to be in the place where a lot was happening in that specific area. So I came here to do my master's. And master's in biotech led me to a job in a biotech company where I was a research associate, working on, again, putting things together, putting DNAs together, and purifying proteins, and all in the context of developing cancer drugs and monoclonal antibodies. And to me, the big picture of what we were doing as a company, as a biotech company, was extremely exciting. But as a research associate, I think I was doing a lot of foundational tasks and basic skills I was developing, be it pipetting, measuring, or growing a cell culture. But I was missing the big picture, or the fundamental concepts that were driving some of the science behind what I was doing. And from conversations with some of my leaders in the company and managers, I kind of figured out that, maybe I like the basics of science. I should go into that kind of track and get my PhD. That led me to my PhD in molecular biology. And And I think a lot shifted for me in my exposure in being in Manhattan in New York, where I was able to get that kind of like exposure to various different labs and various researchers, various conferences, industry panels that I would attend, that kind of gave me a lot of exposure in terms of like understanding things outside of my lab, outside of my basic science. I spent 7 years studying maybe 100 base pairs of DNA, and which is like a really tiny element of a within a gene that I was studying. And looking back, I'm like, wow, I spent a lot of time studying a very small aspect of, it's a really tiny fraction in the drop of big ocean of biology. But it was a good experience for me to like go through that process, and the exposure that I had about what's going on in the industry kind of like led me into, delving a little bit more into the industry, and also learning about things that could have a quicker, maybe I was being impatient. So I wanted to have like a tangible, quicker impact. And when I learned that you could do those kind of science, but not be doing experiments, that got me thinking like, okay, this is interesting. So I could be a scientist in a context that's not necessarily where I'm sitting and experimenting the whole day. So that led me into the non-traditional track of going into scientific communication, where I got the opportunity to work with pharma companies to build their communication materials for physicians or patients, or how they wanted to talk about their drugs and products in big meetings, congresses, etc. So that was a fascinating kind of like, exposure to the non-traditional track of how science is being discussed, the communication aspect and the business aspect of science. During the time was when, like, that was around like 6 years ago, where AI has been around, like, for some time now, but I think there's been a lot of chatter in the last decade. So I picked up, and I think it was a combination of, I was doing some work which were interesting, big picture work, but at the same time, I had a lot of frustrating kind of work as well, to look back and be like, wait, did I go through all this grad school and all the hard work to like literally draw boxes on a PowerPoint? Like, why is there not a better technology to do this? So I was just reading a lot about AI, and I understood that there could be ways to automate things that I was doing in a more meaningful way, where time could be spent more on strategic things rather than, having somebody, build basic data or like do basic slides that could all be automated as a process. And that's kind of when I looked at AI use cases and how automation is being used in the industry. And the same time, timing would have it, I came across this company that I work for, that I've been working for over the last 5-6 years now, Cognitic. They were building something very similar to how I was thinking about automation. And that kind of led me into the automation space, basic machine learning. And what we're doing now is like some aspects of machine learning and simple AI concepts that we use every day to automate some of the strategic and data and insights that scientists would need to use, or business life sciences professionals would need to use in their everyday business. So it was there was no straightforward path. It was a lot of like learnings and mistakes, ups and downs, and climbing up the ladder, climbing down the ladder, and figuring it out. So it kind of like brought me into the space of AI and convergence of my foundational background in science.
Yeah, I mean, the one question that runs through my mind, well, I guess two. One, how do you use scissors today? And secondly, my other question that came to mind was, overall, as you think about your current role as with business strategy, do you feel like the scientific background gives you, an awful strong foundation, I guess, to be able to have the discussions that you need to have?
Absolutely. So I don't use scissors today. I'm not doing those kind of experiments right now, but I did quite a bit in my PhD days and all that. So I did have my fair share of playing with those enzymes and DNA and cells. So today, the second question is a really great question. So I think, I think it's a great leverage that I have the scientific background, because our end users, like I'm at Cognitic right now, and our end users are who have scientific background like me. So I think I bring great, me and my team who are scientifically trained, have a lot of added advantage here because we know what our users typically would think about these data sets that we work with. And one thing that scientists are trained to is to be they're very specific about what they're looking for, and they care a lot about data integrity and data accuracy. So I think the scientific training helps us establish those data integrity and data accuracy in everything that we do. But at the same time, understanding the business to know where to draw the mark to say that, hey, these are the limitations of the technology. We can't go beyond this percentage of accuracy. So here is a balance. And then bring the transparency to our users to say that here's the data, but watch out for these kind of like limitations that exist in this. So I think having that foundational scientific knowledge, and because we work day in and day out with scientific data sets, and our users are scientists are scientifically trained, there's a great advantage in learning the business side of thing and understanding what the use cases could look like, and kind of like also building the product roadmap and the product strategy, or where it's going to be most impactful and which areas is it going to be most impactful. What kind of disease areas do we need to look into? So it plays a big role. So the scientific team that at Cognitic brings a lot, to the table in terms of our scientific understanding or the business understanding of the business needs and the user's needs at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So can we talk a little bit about Cognitic? What is it that they do? What's the mission of the company, and how do they impact the life sciences sector?
Sure. Happy to talk about Cognitic. So Cognitic is a AI-based competitive intelligence platform for the life sciences industry. So what we're doing today is we're modernizing the space of intelligence in the way that information is accessed, insights are generated, or how to interpret the data, or how to digitally transform some of the ways of which insights are looked at and insights are shared. So we partner typically with groups such as research and development, business development, search and evaluation, and competitive intelligence as well, for gaining insights into understanding clinical trials, drugs that are in development, or the latest events that are going on, and really, end of the day, help determine their competitive strategy, their portfolio strategy, or some of the pipeline decisions that they would make, or some of the research strategy, strategic decisions that they would make around their research questions. So it really is it is an information portal to get quick insights, to get quick access to information. So that's what we do today. And there have been quite a few transformative and disruptive use cases from the context of digital transformation that I'd be happy to highlight as well.
Yeah, that'd be good. I mean, so it kind of leads me to my next question, which is, what is the typical customer look like that comes to you, and what problem are they trying to solve?
Sure. So our power users are, I would say like there are three groups within pharma, or three functions within pharma that I would call as our power users: competitive intelligence group, R&D, insights group, and also search and evaluation group. So for search and evaluation, let's say they are essentially big pharma, and coming out of JPM that happened earlier this month, we saw some big M&A activities that happened. So the business development group that sits in pharma is always scouting for interesting new molecules or smaller biotechs or that have efficacious data. So there is always activity or like scouting for information like that. And it's really like looking for those nuggets that nobody else has seen, so they could like look at it or talk to them first. So we help quite a bit in those kind of processes where if they wanted to understand like, hey, I'm interested in this particular mechanism of action, like we're trying to expand our portfolio. This is one of our gaps that exist, and we're trying to like build on our portfolio within this particular space. And let's see what exists out there. Let's see what kind of data, what companies are out there with good data that we could potentially talk to about, and what kind of molecules are they developing, et cetera. So for such activities, you essentially need like sure, Google is a place to go, or maybe now Perplexity is a place to go. But of course, you need like a more strategically narrowed, nicely defined data sets that has information on that context. And that's where tools like Cognitic and ours come in, and where we're able to get those information quicker to our end users so they can do their due diligence to understand that, oh, there's this small biotech that has this drug, this powerful MOA, and has some really good data coming out of their clinical trials. Let's go approach them, right? So that's one kind of use case with one group where it helps them do due diligence around their M&A thought process or portfolio strategy that they're thinking about. And secondly, competitive intelligence, where they're always monitoring what their competition is doing, and they need data like yesterday, right? Like to know, like, hey, to know before it has happened or know as it is happening, and as accurately as they can, because a lot hinges on those competitive strategy or the competitive strategic decks that these groups are putting together. A lot of leadership decisions are made by the insights that they gather. So the CI group plays a very important role in pharma. And they, again, need like tools and resources where they can have this information right away. Similarly with research groups as well, that would like to understand coming from a more thorough, robust picture, right? To understand, hey, I want to know everything that's going on in this particular modality. Let's say antibody drug conjugates is like a really talked about emerging modality in cancer. I want to know everything that's going on, who's working on it, what kind of, and it goes into the details of how the drug is designed, what kind of like payloads are they using, what information, what targets are they targeting, are these bispecifics? So really go into round tripping the data, go into drilling into all the levels of information they could get, and that would then support them to make a lot of decisions.
And the types of data that you typically have that informs your AI, is it things that are oftentimes published at, let's say, congresses and things like that, or is it even private studies as well that help to feed the information model?
Anything that's in the public domain, we get it. Like, be it congresses, be it press releases, be it in a publication, we're able to like look at it and immediately bring it into it. If something's not there in the public domain, we're not like doing that level of primary intelligence to, get the information that's not directly available through secondary means of information right now.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, whenever you mentioned Perplexity, I oftentimes find myself anymore sort of trying to figure out what sources it's using whenever it's feeding me information. Because one of the things I have learned is that, if you ask a question and it doesn't have the answer, it'll make it up anyway. So I oftentimes want to know where's the information coming from. So I would imagine it's even more important on this front.
Absolutely. I mean, the referral links help, but to your point, sometimes it's like, wait, like I've gone through these phases where this kind of thing never happened. And why are they saying this? There's no stat test this. It does get tricky, but I guess that's where you got to awareness is so important and how we use those materials.
Yeah, just so anybody knows, by the way, my recent sort of uncovered disconnect for AI outside of life sciences was I was asking Google if there was a Michelin star restaurant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Gemini made it up and said there was when there wasn't. And of course, that block that comes up in your search results now, it essentially said that there was a Michelin star restaurant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which would have surprised me, but I, just wanted to know.
Interesting.
Absolutely. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you see in developing AI solutions for complex scientific domains like drug development?
That's a good question. I think generally, like, biology is just complex. There's just so much complexity, so many unknowns. It's not like we know everything about the human biology right now or biology in general. There's just so many unknowns and the complexity. So I think from that point, it's a challenge to navigate through that kind of complexity and the unknowns, or we don't know what we know, we don't know what we don't know. So there's just so much from that complexity point of view. And I also think, secondly, from a point of the data being fragmented, it's just, I don't think like when it comes to biological data or medical data, healthcare data, it's just it's so vast and so complicatedly fragmented, segmented. It's not like, easy to, there are systems, of course, in place to like kind of like connect various data pieces, but I think the nature of those fragmented data, the privacy around it, I think there are some challenges that sit with it. And I also, is that bothering like the smoke alarm? I don't know if you can hear it or
I
not.
hear the battery running out, so we'll
Yeah,
try and
it just
finish up
happened
it.
this morning. So, and I think also when it comes to other complexities surrounding it, I know this touches a little bit about around the ability on ethics aspects of things when it comes to data biases, right? Like, is our data representative of everything that we're supposed to look at, especially when we're dealing with patients' data? Are we training these models with the right representative data set, right? If it's going to make paradigm shifting drug discoveries or health related information for health related decisions for patients, is the data that these models are trained on, is it biased? Is it representative of everything? It's inclusive of everything. I think that's an important aspect as well when it comes to some of the challenges surrounding this. So I think from a high level, like the nature of the complex data sets and the unknowns around biology, and also I would also add to that we talked a little bit about like biases around the data, and I would also say something to do a little bit on the explainability aspect of it. And I think we, from our context in terms of like the data that we use, we find it challenging sometimes to explain the data sets, right? The transparency and the explainability feature of the AI is something that, that there is work. There are like ways that there could be layers of proxies that you could bring in to explain some of the AI generated, be it a prediction or be it some kind of decisions that are coming out of these tools. There are ways to bring transparency into it, but it's also complicated. For example, at Cognitic, we built a AI generated predictive model that would predict a timeline of a clinical trial. It's fascinating, the kind of like data sets that it's been trained on and how it's able to make predictions. And when we also do analysis on the accuracies, how well did this model do for the completed trials of the past, we do see the model being accurate, in most cases even 300 days more accurate than a sponsor. So there is value to this, but when the end user is not able to specifically understand, exactly tell me why you're saying this is going to be Q2 of 2025 and not Q1 of 2025, there are mechanisms we've established to bring that explainability, but it's not as simple as how somebody would sit next to you as a consultant and explain that to you, because it is a black box model to some extent to be able to kind of like tease out every single aspect of what went exactly to generating this prediction. But I think we're working, where we are establishing certain processes around, let's say, explaining this data better, explaining the lineage around this data better, and explaining a little bit about, how these models are built and what does this mean and how does this impact your decision. So there are challenges, just to summarize what I was saying in terms of the complexity of the biology, the data biases, or the transparency, and also around the explainability features of some of this could be quite challenging in life sciences use case or in general too.
And so, as a scientific strategist, how do you balance the needs for scientific accuracy with business strategy in your role?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and I had to learn, and that's been one of my toughest learnings in the last 6 years, to be able to balance the level of scientific accuracy that I would look for coming out of some of the algorithms we would develop versus our go-to-market strategy, right? So there has to be a fine balance. I could spend the next 2 years developing the LLM with like 98% accuracy and then go to market with that. Or can we go to market in 6 months with 92% accuracy, right? So I think those are some elements that I've learned to balance coming from a foundational trained as a scientist initially, right? And I had to learn quick. And when I say initially, I spent maybe the first 3-4 months, I had to figure out like, wait, we need this level of accuracy. And then we we're like, okay, we're never going to bring this product out to the market if we keep sitting on it. So let's find that balance between like, this is a usable product, or if we do a phased release to say that this is our MVP that we're going to establish, and then we go to our phase 1 where we improve the accuracy, and then the phase 2 where it's going to be better accuracy. Because I think there's a lot to gain from balancing that accuracy with the business use case and the industry needs quicker to the market rather than waiting for something to be perfect. So I'll give you an example of what a dilemma we're actually dealing with right now as we speak is we're building a new product. We've built a beta version of this product called Outcomes. And what this does is it covers all clinical trial data, and we're building a database of efficacies for oncology drugs and clinical trials. So there's surprisingly no database out there where you could go and say like, hey, tell me what is the efficacy of these 100 clinical trials that are running in lung cancer. What are the results of these trials, like tabulated, right? ChatGPT will give you anything that it wants, but there is no like a clean version of it. And I think that's where structured databases like ours come into play, where we put the work into structuring this data, segmenting it, cleaning it nicely, normalizing it. So our models are learning from a well-structured, well-curated data set. So there's an advantage to it. So this database, the outcomes database that we're building, are the LLM models that we're using are able to take us to a certain percentage, but our wish of what this percentage should be and our users' wish list of what this percentage should be is way, way much higher, right? So we're currently around like an 80% accuracy, and we're striving for this to become a 95% accuracy in a short time frame. So depending on the use case, in this use case, we would wait a couple of quarters or even one more quarter to bring this product out into the market with a better accuracy rather than rushing too soon, because this is a kind of product that demands or like requires or necessitates that kind of accuracy. So we can't go to market that quick with compromising on that 10% accuracy gap that exists. But there are other use cases where that kind of compromise could exist, where we could go out with 90% accuracy and not the 95 that we require. So it really also depends on the delicate understanding. And to your question earlier, that's where I think the scientific understanding of the data set comes in, and the understanding of the business use case and what would sell, right? So it's a convergence of multiple things that really take into consideration to determine, are we ready to go to the market or not?
Yeah, and I mean the one additional thing that really came to mind in your answer, as well as just the future of AI. It seems to me like, I mean, NVIDIA continues to shrink things down and make things smaller. There's constantly new algorithms that at least on the public side that we're seeing there. What emerging trends and technologies in AI do you think are going to have the most significant impact on life sciences in the coming years?
I think Gen AI and drug discovery is going to make, it's going to be a very kind of like paradigm shifting aspect in how molecules are created or how drugs are created. And I think we're in a very exciting time. And we just saw like Recursion ringing the opening bell today at NASDAQ and like calling it as, marking the beginning of the tech bio era and all that. I think all that is very exciting, right? So I think I'm most excited about how there's going to be such a shift in how drugs are developed. And some of these AI-driven drugs are already in clinical trials, and it's going to be exciting to see, how they perform and what that's going to look like. So I really think target identification and accelerating the process of drug discovery, and I think as what we can do as human beings, like to fathom, like looking through like millions of compounds to see what would stick, right? I think some of those, it shrinks the timeline. Like some of those could take years and years for us to do it by hand. But with these kind of like Gen AI driven technologies that would accelerate these drug discovery processes to help us find those needle in a haystack or find the best target much quicker in fraction of the time and fraction of the cost to some extent that it would take like some of these shifting it from a traditional process to this AI driven process. So I'm most excited about, and I think the most impact in the life sciences industry that we would see is in around the AI drug discovery, around those technologies. But having said that, I think those are the big wins that we hope for with AI. But I think there are so many use cases and so many areas where there could be much quicker wins, be it with data or how we process this data, how we get insights from this data, kind of like what companies like Cognitic do, right? Does. And it could also be with certain efficiencies around like research labs. There are so many quicker wins to gain as well, while we're aiming for the big picture with drug discovery and all of that. So, which might take a few years to come through to like, look at reap the benefits of it. But there are so many use cases where, pharma companies and life sciences companies in general are establishing quick wins with how they process data or how they process information.
I think look, I'm not a lab scientist, right? I mean, my background isn't that, but these conversations always make me wonder. In the future, I guess a couple of different things. One is, if you're a scientist and along the path of drug discovery, you have more questions. I would hope that AI empowers you to be able to ask those questions and get answers quicker, right? Just in general, because I would imagine that researchers sit there all the time saying, well, I wish I could better define this, or I wish I understood, this other part of what's happening that isn't quite clear. The secondary part that I really look forward to in what you said with regards to drug discovery is if in the path of going through the development of the drug that you have, you run into some brick wall, that Gen AI has the ability eventually to suggest here are possible ways for solving that problem, right? That maybe you wouldn't have come up with otherwise. Yeah. Maybe it has the general knowledge of every other researcher and what they've done to kind of find their way around, and all of a sudden those become pathways for finalization of the drug. Those things excite me, out of that as well.
No, that's so true, right? To troubleshoot, like, okay, this didn't work, now what? I think science is generally underlined with so many troubleshooting and like, permutations or paths that you could take or you shouldn't take. And I think, from your point as well, from a scientist point of view, it's really information. What do I do with this information, or what more can I get from this, right? For example, we work a lot with R&D research scientists, and some of their ask, while we talk about, that's what I was mentioning earlier too, like we're talking a lot about these big picture elements or like complex projects that we want to undertake, but sometimes there is a lot to do in, I would call this like simple AI or quick fixes for some of the challenges that exist that could empower scientists to do more. For example, there are tools that are available for scientists to understand the pathways, or when you look at a cancer pathway or a cellular pathway, one molecule binds to another molecule, triggers another downstream signaling reaction, right? So many things happen across various. Scientists have like interesting questions for us on those contexts where they're like, okay, we're working with company one that has this data, and then we're working with you guys, and you're telling me that this molecule has these trials, these drugs. Can you like superimpose everything together so we're looking at everything in one place? And like, or can you build like an LLM model around it that could help us like answer some of those questions? I think there is a lot of simpler use cases, I think, that are there that, that needs to be solved while folks like NVIDIA, Recursion, et cetera, are like solving some of the bigger challenges with target identification and drug discovery. And that's one of the angles where, like, we at Cognitic and myself on this journey as well, like as I'm looking into what are going to be some of the emerging challenges or byproducts of this whole AI-driven drug discovery. And I truly think that's going to open doors for a lot of data and analytics companies or SaaS platforms that might die soon of the past, to kind of like come in and have that expertise to solve some of the problems that are going to stem from AI drug discovery that's happening right now.
Yes, again, from a outsider's view, one of my favorite things about Google's Notebook LM is the fact that you can have your own model that has its blinders on and can't see everything that's out there, and so it can only see what you feed it directly. And I do love that, because then you can ask very specific questions about clients and how to potentially best serve some of the things that they want. And so I can completely understand this idea of wanting, hey, look, I just want all of anybody else that's researching the same thing all in one place, and be able to ask my very specific questions without it getting confused by other outside answers that could be there. So yeah, very interesting. So last three questions. What inspires you?
What inspires me? Okay. I think for me, I have to say my two daughters. I have two daughters. I think every day I look at them and I build my motivation around like their eyes and like, what kind of like a home I'm setting for them, or what kind of like a world are we creating for our children, right? So I think that inspires me quite a bit from a very personal side of things. And I think from a professional side of things, I think what inspires me is looking into some of the bold challenges that the industry is ready to take up. And I go back to the same example of AI drug discovery to say that, for hundreds of years, we've done something in a traditional way, and now the technology is going to shift it quite a bit. And we as human beings are so open-minded to it. And it's a very complex challenge to navigate through. So I think, just looking at examples of some of the companies that are doing some groundbreaking work on an everyday basis, every day, it's almost overwhelming to the extent of, what kind of work is being done on an everyday basis around like AI drug discovery and the challenges that we're taking, like digital twins and all that, what would be like a science fiction. So I think it really inspires me to see the kind of bold, unthinkable challenges that we collectively as human beings or scientists are ready to kind of like tackle, like go out there. So that really fascinates me and inspires me to, be even a small part of this whole like bigger picture of things.
Absolutely. What concerns you?
I think to some extent the AI, the ethics around it, like, sticking to the topic of AI, I think the aspects around the data biases concern me the most. And I also read some, I don't know to what extent, there are metrics to calculate this. There's going to be some kind of like environmental impact because of how the extent to which we're using AI. So I don't know how that's going to be calculated, but there's been some calculations out there that measure, when LLMs are run, this is the impact on the environment. So I'm not sure. I think there are processes that are being set around measuring the impact of some of these engines and work and backend that's going on from these data centers and infrastructures that are built around it. And just today we heard about Stargate and all that. So I'm not sure what the environmental impact or what kind of like committees are going to be set up to kind of like measure that, or if that's going to be, I'm sure it's significant. From what I read, it's significant impact. but is that going to outweigh like the benefits of what we're getting out of it, right? The efficiencies we're going to get out of it, or the costs we're going to save it out of it. So maybe all of that will kind of like balance out the impact that these technologies have on the environment. But and also from a data bias point of view, I think especially when it comes to patient data and healthcare data, we all understand that it's not always, especially in clinical trials, it's not well represented. Like all populations are not well represented. So there are concerns around how some of these models are being trained. But at the same time, everybody's keeping, all the companies are, I think from even from what we work with with pharma, there are risk assessment committees that look into these aspects of things. So there are like organizations are being savvy and mindful about some of the structures and processes that they build around looking into these data biases or risk associated with these kind of data biases. So that's one area that I hope that there's going to be more structure and understanding and alignment across everybody, and cutting down or shrinking times of looking at regulations for these. I hope that all that is done mindfully and well thought out, especially with racial disparity. So we did a project internally at Cognitic on where we partnered with the pharma looking at how clinical trial protocols mention their role in bringing in all races into their trials or bringing in underrepresented population into their trials. So we ran a model to understand across thousands of clinical trial protocols in cancer how our pharma companies talking about their strategies for how they're going to establish or improve recruitment for underrepresented population. And there was some of the results we got were really alarming, like were very not great. So, and that did help one of the pharma partners that we were working with to bring in more transparency into how they're going to set up their criteria to ensure that all populations will be represented in their trials. So I think it made a small change in how they were going to look at it. So there's data bias, that's my concern around like patient data and are we using the right set of data to model? But at the same time, I also, on the other flip side of things, we are learning that there are committees and organizations that are being set up to tackle these.
Yeah, also important, and thank you for sharing that concern. Last question: what excites you?
What excites me is a lot of things excite me. So I think what specifically excites me right now is to, I'll probably maybe pick something very specific. I'm really looking to see some of the, given that I focus specifically on oncology, there are some really interesting drugs that are in clinical trial right now, and they do have some good data. And there's a few that's doing better than well-established standard of care. So I'm really excited to see what the data of all of that's going to look like. And I'm keeping an eyes peeled for, when those data come out and how that's going to impact the treatment paradigm and also reach the patients. So there are a few drugs that I'm really closely following just to understand what that's going to mean for lung cancer space, right? And what's that going to mean for the patients? So I think some of the drugs that are in pipeline that are closer to their readouts and all of that is very fascinating for me for this year, specifically to see what that's going to look like. I think just this month with the JPM that happened, there were so many good M&As that came out of it. So I'm really excited to see how rest of the year is going to shape up in terms of like those sort of activities and seeing like who's going to partner with whom or who's going to buy which asset or licensing deal. So I think I'm excited and I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in the industry, what's new, what's changing.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And Gayatri Raghupathy, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success podcast. And I really appreciated hearing your insights. And I think the sound behind you is a good reminder to everybody to go change the battery in your fire detectors, smoke detectors.
Absolutely. It happened in my side of things. It happened this morning. I got to get on it. But thank you so much, Don. This was wonderful. Thanks for engaging conversation and thought-provoking questions. makes me think a lot about it. I think it just a lot of thoughts in my head right now, but appreciate you for the great discussion.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.